Hank Schrader is a hero. Let's get that out of the way first. He took down Tuco Salamanca. He survived the Cousins. He was the only person in the DEA smart enough to see through Gus Fring's mask when everyone else just saw a respectable businessman. Hank was a bloodhound. So how does a man who hunts drug lords for a living fail to notice that the most dangerous kingpin in American history is sitting across from him at the barbecue for 2 whole years? The internet loves to say Hank was incompetent, that he was a loudmouth jock who just wasn't smart enough to catch the genius nerd. It is a satisfying theory because it makes us feel superior, but it is completely wrong. I have analyzed every single interaction between Walt and Hank across all 5 seasons, and the truth is not that Hank was stupid. It is that his brain was actively protecting him from a reality that would destroy him. Hank did not miss the clues because he couldn't see them. He missed them because of a specific psychological mechanism called familial blindness. In this video, we are going to dissect the exact moments where Hank was standing 1 inch away from Heisenberg. We are going to break down the $500,000 joke, the RV incident, and the WW theory. And by the end, you will understand why the smartest detective on the show had to be the blindest. Let's start with perhaps the most audacious moment in the entire series. It is season 3. Walt is moving out. Hank picks up a duffel bag that weighs a ton. He asks, "What do you got in there, cinder blocks?" And Walt looks him dead in the eye and says, $500,000 in cash. Look at that moment. For a split second, the truth is floating in the air. Walt just confessed. He literally told the DEA agent exactly what crime he has committed and exactly where the evidence is. And what does Hank do? He laughs. He treats it as a joke. Why? This brings us to our first psychological filter, the ego shield. To Hank, Walt is a beta. He is a high school teacher who washes cars for extra cash. He is the guy Hank has to save from bullies. Hank's entire worldview, his identity as the alpha male, depends on this hierarchy. If Hank accepts that Walt actually has $500,000, he has to accept that Walt is a player, that Walt is capable, that Walt might even be more dangerous than him. Psychologically, Hank's brain rejects this premise. It triggers confirmation bias. Hank interprets the statement $500,000 in cash not as a confession, but as a joke. Because in Hank's reality, a joke is the only context where Walter White and $500,000 exist in the same sentence. Walt knows this. He uses Hank's low opinion of him as camouflage. It is the perfect disguise. You do not hide in the shadows. You hide in the blinding light of your opponent's arrogance. But okay, talk is cheap. Let us look at the physical evidence. We need to go back to season 1. Hank finds a gas mask at a cook site in the middle of the desert. It is not just any mask, it belongs to J.P. Wynn High School, the very school where his brother-in-law keeps the inventory. This should be game over. The equipment comes from Walt's lab. Walt has the key. Walt is a chemistry genius who is desperate for money. The line from point A to point B is straight. But instead of looking at Walt, Hank arrests Hugo Archillia, the janitor. Why? Because Hugo fits the profile. He is Latino. He has a prior record for possession. He fits the pattern Hank has spent 20 years building. This is what psychologists call inattentional blindness, or the invisible gorilla effect. When you are hyper-focused on looking for a specific type of threat, like a stereotypical drug dealer profile, you literally cannot see a threat that does not match that profile, even if it walks right in front of you. Hank assumes the equipment was stolen from Walt, not by Walt. He casts Walt as the victim because the victim role is the only one available for him in Hank's mental script. And the most painful part of this scene is not that Hank messed up, it is that he sincerely comforts Walt. He pats him on the shoulder. He says, "Poor Walt, having his inventory stolen." Hank is so convinced he is right that he never even asks Walt for an alibi. If he had just asked the question, "Walt, where were you that day?" the entire house of cards would have collapsed right there in the first season. But Hank does not ask questions to people he has already decided are innocent. Now, let us look at the closest call of them all, the RV incident. We are in the middle of season 3, and the stakes are higher than ever. Hank has tracked Jesse Pinkman to a junkyard. He has him cornered inside the RV. He knows the legendary blue meth cook is inside. He is literally moments away from getting a warrant and ending the show right there. But then, the phone rings. A voice tells him that his wife Marie has been in a critical car accident. This moment is crucial. Hank drops everything and leaves. Later, he finds out it was a lie, a trick to get him to leave the scene. And what happens next? Hank focuses all his rage on Jesse. He beats him half to death. But stop and think for a second. In all that anger, Hank misses the most obvious question in the world. How did Jesse Pinkman know Hank's wife's name? How did he know her private, personal cell phone number? And how did he know exactly what button to push to make Hank leave immediately? Jesse is a street-level dealer. He does not have that kind of intelligence. Only one person in that entire equation knew Marie: Walt. But Hank never makes the connection. Why? Because of emotional hijacking. The trauma of thinking his wife was dead put Hank into a state of pure fight or flight. When the brain is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, complex analytical reasoning shuts down. Hank could not deduce the logical source of the leak because he was too busy drowning in the emotional aftermath. He needed a target for his rage, and Jesse was right there. So once again, Walt slipped away in the chaos. We move to season 4. The net is tightening around Gus Fring. Hank is still recovering from his injuries, but his detective instincts are sharper than ever. He asks Walt to drive him to the industrial laundry. He suspects it is the location of the super lab. Walt knows that if they pull into that parking lot, he is a dead man. The cartel will see him, or Gus will see him with Hank. There is no way out. So Walt makes a choice. He deliberately drives into oncoming traffic. It is a violent, insane move. And afterwards, as Hank sits there in a neck brace, in pain, set back months in his recovery, what does he think happened? He thinks Walt just had a brain fart. He thinks Walt is just a terrible driver who panicked under pressure. He views it as an accident. This is the ultimate irony of their relationship. Walt's frantic attempt to kill the investigation is interpreted by Hank as just another example of Walt being a bumbling, incompetent suburban dad. Walt fails upwards. His failure to drive properly protects his secret. Hank never considers malice because malice implies agency, and in Hank's mind, Walt has no agency. He is just a passenger in his own life. So once again, the alibi of incompetence saves Heisenberg. And finally, we arrive at the beginning of the end. There is a scene in season 4 that foreshadows everything. Hank is showing Walt the evidence from the Gail Bedecker case. He points to a dedication in the lab notes that says, "To WW." Hank jokes about it. He says, "Woodrow Wilson? Willy Wonka? Walter White?" And Walt raises his hands and says, "You got me." Walt confesses right to his face. But again, the context of the joke saves him. However, luck cannot last forever. In the mid-season finale of season 5, at a casual family barbecue, Hank goes to the bathroom. He picks up a book, Leaves of Grass. He opens it and sees the handwriting, "To my other favorite WW." In that moment, Hank experiences what cognitive psychologists call a pattern recognition cascade. Suddenly, the invisible gorilla is the only thing he can see. All the isolated incidents we talked about, the duffel bag of money, the gas mask, the phone call about Marie, the car crash, in one split second, they all connect. Look at Hank's reaction in that scene. It is not triumph. It is not a victory lap. He looks physically sick. He is having a panic attack. Because this is not just about solving a case. It is the total destruction of his reality. He realizes that the man he pitied, the man he tried to protect, has been the one pulling the strings the entire time. Hank realizes he was never the hunter. He was the prey. Hank Schrader's failure was not a plot hole. It was the entire point of the show. Breaking Bad is not just about a man turning into a monster. It is about how the people around him refused to see the monster, because seeing it would cost them too much. Hank loved Walt, and that love was the blindfold. It is a tragic reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people in our lives are not the ones hiding in the dark. They are the ones we invite into our homes, disguised as family. If you enjoyed this deep dive, check out my video on why Gus Fring's empire was doomed from day one. And let me know in the comments, do you think you would have caught Walt sooner, or would you have been just as blind as Hank? Thanks for watching.